Most bear attacks happen deep in the wild, far from anyone else and far from any kind of help. But this one was different. It happened at a family campground in front of witnesses on a summer evening that was otherwise supposed to be peaceful. This is the horrifying true story of the Liard River Hot Springs bear attack, one that saw multiple people severely mauled by a large black bear, 2 of which lost their lives. Patti McConnell and her 2 children, Kelly and Kirstin, were in the midst of a long journey, driving from Paris, Texas, all the way to their new home in Alaska. Along the way, they decided to stop at Liard River Hot Springs to rest and unwind, which was much needed as it's a very long drive, and they were doing this just before continuing their drive north. Now, this park is located in northern British Columbia and is known as one of Canada's largest hot springs. It's famous for its warm waters and lush plant life. Eager to unwind and get settled in, the trio quickly changed into their swimsuits and headed down to the lower pool. The water was warm, it was inviting, and especially after being on the road for so long, the trio really just quickly settled in for this relaxing soak before deciding that they were going to check out the more secluded upper pool. But 7-year-old Kirstin couldn't wait for this. She was as restless as ever. She really didn't stay long and decided to go straight to the lower pool with some new friends that she just made. Now, worried about her safety, Patti and Kelly decided to follow her. And as they made their way toward the hanging gardens, Kelly pointed out a spot where they could check out some exotic plants, something the 2 were into. So the 2 of them climbed a short set of steps through the bush to a viewing platform. They paused for a moment, taking in the lush greenery and those exotic plants that they were really into. However, neither of them noticed that the bushes were rustling right beside the boardwalk. And as Patti began stepping carefully down the wet stairs, something abruptly caught her. She suddenly locked eyes with a large adult male black bear sitting in the shrubs. It was calmly chewing on a dogwood branch. Stunned, Patti whispered urgently to her son, "Kelly, bear." Now, at first, Kelly thought she was just joking until he turned around and came face to face with a now towering black bear standing on its hind legs. Now, realizing just how serious the situation was, he quietly warned his mom, "Don't move, just stay still." And just as Kelly started inching closer to her, the bear let out a sharp grunt and lunged straight through the railing onto the boardwalk. Panicked, Kelly shouted, "Mom, run." Patti bolted up the stairs as fast as she could toward the viewing platform, but the bear was right behind her. And with a running speed of up to 35 miles per hour, Kelly watched in horror as his mother didn't stand a chance, and this bear caught up to her within seconds, knocked her to the ground, and clamped its powerful jaws around her torso. Now, despite being unarmed and his small and scrawny frame, Kelly didn't hesitate. He charged at this bear, kicking it in the face and shouting for it to get off his mother. The massive animal then grunted, barely flinching, and then turned its attention back to Patti, ignoring Kelly completely. Kelly at this point was fueled by pure adrenaline and rage. He quickly scanned the area for anything that he could use as a weapon, something that could hopefully even make this bear flinch. This is when he spotted a broken tree limb. He grabbed it and began swinging it over and over at this bear's head. And he was doing this all while screaming for help at the top of his lungs. In the chaos, he caught a glimpse of his mother's blood. This blood was glistening on the bear's teeth, and this prompted something really primal inside him to snap. He swung again, landing a solid hit right across the bear's nose, and this time, he did get this bear's attention. This bear started to roar, now it was in some pain, and this time the bear lashed out with its powerful paws right at Kelly, raking deep claw marks into his neck and shoulders. Then it easily overpowered him, sank its teeth into his waist, and swung him through the air as if he was a rag doll. Now, bears are of course super mighty, and even though this was a black bear, they can get up to 600 pounds, so it's no joke. Kelly could feel himself slipping into unconsciousness as the bear hurled him onto the deck with tremendous force, leaving him curled up beside his motionless mother. Now, barely conscious and bleeding, Kelly tried to crawl toward Patti, but the bear came at him again at this point, biting down and tearing at his flesh, causing him to scream in agony, all while fighting the urge to throw up from the rancid smell of its breath. At that moment, Kelly knew that death was near. He closed his eyes and basically started waiting for the inevitable. This is when Ray Kitchen, a 56-year-old trucker from Fort Nelson, BC, would arrive at the scene. He'd been relaxing with his daughter Jolene nearby when he'd heard Kelly and Patti's screams. Also grabbing a fallen tree branch, he started pounding it against the railing, trying to fend the bear off. Realizing that this bear wasn't intimidated, Kitchen then dropped the branch that he was using, grabbed a larger one, and basically shoved this branch into the bear's belly as hard as he could. Now, he did this in order to try to force it away from Kelly, but this action only made things worse. The bear then fully turned on Kitchen, charging at him full speed, slamming into him, and knocking him straight through the railing into the bushes below. Panicked, Kitchen scrambled onto his knees toward a nearby tree, shielding his head with his hands as the bear swiped at him with its claws, and he was screaming for help at this point. And this is when the commotion was heard by another man, Tony Dock. Now, this man rushed toward the scene, and ahead of him on the boardwalk, there were other people running, and included in this crowd were 71-year-old Frank Hedingham, Ingrid Bailey, who was a wilderness firefighter and paramedic from Felton, California, as well as her friend, Brad Westervelt. They had already heard the shouts. They heard "Help, bear, get a gun," and they were moving quickly toward the parking lot. They were trying to exit the park. They were trying to do this with the rest of the panicked crowd, but unlike most, Bailey, Westervelt, and Hedingham, they were no strangers to bears, and instead of fleeing, they grabbed sticks and chunks of wood and headed straight toward the danger. When they reached the viewing platform, the scene below was horrifying. 2 bloodied bodies lay sprawled out across the deck now. The bear had Kitchen in its grip, its jaws clamped around his arm and shoulder, and claws tearing into his flesh. It was also basically feeding on him at this point. Now, I do want to mention that this bear, it was a black bear. And usually when black bears attack, this is known as a predatory attack. This is not something that's territorial like you would see with a grizzly bear, for instance, where you'd be better off likely just curling into a ball, protecting your vital organs. You don't stand a chance fighting against a grizzly bear. Not that you stand a huge chance fighting against a black bear either, but they're easily more deterred when it comes to bears. And when a black bear does decide to attack, it's usually considered a predatory attack. Once again, that means they want to eat. This bear was likely starving, which is why it decided to go for these humans. However, I do also want to mention that Liard Hot Springs, this park specifically, really food habituated these bears. The bears in this park, they were used to humans feeding them, and they were used to eating off human scraps. They weren't scared of humans, so this really played a big part in this bear's nature and mentality and reaction towards humans. Just something to note. So, back to the story, Doc and Westervelt spotted a thick tree trunk nearby as well, and they too would grab this and use it as a battering ram. Even with both of them pushing and trying to attack this bear, they couldn't drive the relentless creature away. And this is when Bailey quickly realized that they really needed a gun. She started looking around frantically for the park ranger. Westervelt took off to find help, while Hedingham, despite being super exhausted and having a bad history of heart attacks, he stayed behind trying to fight the bear. This is when suddenly the bear shifted its focus once again. It turned back toward Kitchen and this time attacked with full force, striking him one more time and tossing him violently into the air, killing him instantly. And as all this happened, Bailey meanwhile rushed to Patti's side. She checked for a pulse and tried to resuscitate her as best as she could, even though deep down she already knew that it was most likely already too late for her. At the same time, Hedingham went to Kelly, who had just regained consciousness and was still desperately trying to reach his mother. And as they were tending to him, the massive black bear would appear once again, stepping back onto the deck. Fueled by anger that all these people are hurt, Hedingham then kicked the bear hard with his hiking boots, knocking it slightly off balance, but really it didn't do much, and instead of retreating, the animal turned and began moving toward the boardwalk, where more people were still gathered. Kelly begged Hedingham to help his mother, but Hedingham told him softly, "Don't move, just breathe slowly. We're doing everything that we can." Using his knowledge of first aid, Hedingham pulled a handkerchief from his jacket and began cleaning the worst of Kelly's wounds. At the same time, Bailey realized they needed towels to use as compresses and also more hands to help with CPR. It was just then, with perfect timing, a group of men came rushing up the stairs, one of them carrying a towel, and another was fortunately in fact trained in CPR. Hedingham and the man with the towel worked together to bind Kelly's wounds, while another man joined Bailey, helping her perform chest compressions as she tried mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on Patti. By now, the bear had already disappeared into the forest, but Bailey couldn't help but wonder where this park ranger was. Hedingham then shouted that they really needed to get these victims to a hospital, and so he took off to go find more help. Around that time, a man named Vandervelden, a research assistant from University of Calgary, he came running down the upper pool with a few other bathers to see what was happening. Amidst all the chaos, someone suddenly shouted, "The bear's coming, run for your lives." People scattered in every direction at this point, and in the midst of this panic, Vandervelden slipped and fell into the bushes. And this happened right as the bear was charging, and since he was so vulnerable at this point, the bear pounced on him and began mauling him viciously. He kicked and pulled at the bear's nose and ears, but this wouldn't help. In fact, it caused the bear to be even more violent, and its teeth and its claws just began tearing into this man's flesh. Meanwhile, Hedingham had reached the park ranger's office. He quickly explained what was happening to Ranger Dave Webb, who grabbed 2 rifles from his motorhome, a Winchester 30-30 and a Remington 223. And he was joined by a young man named Dwayne Eggbrotten, whom he quickly asked if he'd know how to use a gun, to which he said yes, and so they rushed toward the scene. Eggbrotten reached the boardwalk first, and from below he could hear faint moans of Vandervelden and saw the bear crouched over him. It was feeding on him. And so, taking careful aim at the back of the bear's neck, Eggbrotten fired a single, precise shot that caused the bear to collapse instantly. Even though he knew that this shot was fatal, Eggbrotten would fire 2 more rounds just to make sure that this bear was truly dead. And back on the viewing platform, Bailey was still tending to Patti and her son when she heard the gunshots echo through the forest. And this caused her to say, "Shoot it again," because she was so fired up from all this that was happening. She was so upset at this bear for killing this mother and essentially almost killing her son. And so, with that final shot, the terrifying tragedy at Liard River Hot Springs was finally over. Though Patti McConnell lost her life that afternoon, both Kelly McConnell and Ari Vandervelden survived. And this was thanks to the incredible courage, of course, of Ray Kitchen, Ingrid Bailey, Frank Hedingham, and the others who risked everything, including their lives, to help. They were airlifted to a hospital, and after a time, they recovered from their treatment, as well as their severe injuries. More than 500 mourners gathered in Fort Nelson on August 22nd, 1997, to honor the bravery of Ray Kitchen. Now, it's important that I mention this. While researching this case, I came across some really conflicting information about the names, specifically of the people who were involved. Every name I've mentioned so far, it was verified through official records, except for Dwayne Eggbrotten and Dave Webb. I couldn't find much reliable information on these people when it comes to this case. If any of you watching do happen to know more, maybe from local reports, family connections, or firsthand details, drop a comment down below, please, and help fill in those blanks. I'd really appreciate it. I do also want to mention that Ray Kitchen was posthumously awarded Canada's Star of Courage in September of 1998. This was thanks to his bravery that he showed. Also, Frank Hedingham, Ray Kitchen, Kelly McConnell, Ingrid Bailey, Tony Dock, Gary Richmond, Major Harvey Smerchinsky, Bradley David Westervelt also received decorations for their extraordinary bravery. And so this was one of the most brutal bear attacks I've ever heard of. It was so dramatic. Usually things like this, they don't happen at such scale where 6 people were mauled by one bear, and a black bear at that. It's very unfortunate 2 people lost their lives. I do want to mention that most bear attacks, they happen in the way that the other bear attacks that I've covered in this channel happen. I will leave an episode for you at the end screen of this video of a bear attack if you want to check it out. There's one that happened in Yellowstone that has done some really good numbers and a lot of people found interesting. Definitely do check that one out. And also, if you want to check out our last video, which I posted last week, this is about a crocodile attack, a woman that was death rolled, in fact, by a crocodile multiple times and actually survived the ordeal. This was one of the most insane cases I've ever heard of crocodile attacks. I really think you guys should check it out if you haven't already. Once again, thank you so much for all the early support. You guys may know me from When Animals Attack. My name is Animal Al. I don't own that channel anymore. However, this is where you can find me now. This is where I'm making content now. I hope you are enjoying the content. If there are any recommendations as to what cases I can cover next, please do drop a comment down below. You can join our Patreon if you'd like to support this channel, or even become a channel member, and those really go a long way. I will be adding exclusive content to Patreon, hopefully after the next 30 days. I'm just getting this channel a bit more established in the meantime, but if you do want to show your support and join early, then please do. The Patreon link is in the description, and you can join our memberships as well on the channel page. Stay safe out there. Till next time.